All right, we're back with part 4. So now we just finished this slide right here, and we talked about how the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen was created. A little bit later, another lady called Olympus de Gouges, I think is how you pronounce it, she actually created the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Citizen. So I forgot to mention that in the last part, but let's move on, okay? So talking about women and how that happened, okay? Women march on Versailles. So Versailles is the main city where the king is at, okay? The Palace of Versailles, this is where they live their lavish lives. Nobles continued to enjoy their gala banquets while people were basically starving, okay? So even though the king noticed, oh, they made their own national assembly, they still lived their super lavish lives, their super luxurious lifestyles, while people were outside starving to death, okay? By autumn, anger again turned into action. So we talked about the Bastille and how that turned into action. October 5th, about 6,000 women marched for 13 miles, okay? 13 miles. If you look at the track outside of Olathe West, going around that track 4 times, that's 1 mile, all right? To give you kind of an idea. For 13 miles, they marched 6,000 women in the rain from Paris to Versailles while chanting, bread, 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 okay? Remember that I talked about this earlier, that bread is going to be a significance of the fact that people don't have food, people don't have money, people can't survive, and bread is their source of life. And so chanting bread, 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 much of the crowd's anger was directed to the queen. So King Louis XVI was married to Queen Marie Antoinette, okay? Marie Antoinette, she was very, very, very extra. She lived so lavishly. She probably spent the most money on herself, on her crazy hairdos. I'll show you in the next slide. She was basically just spending money and just enjoying her life as if nothing was happening towards the commoners and towards the people. She probably spent the most money. So the women of Paris, they marched not only chanting bread, but they also marched saying death to the Austrian. She was an Austrian, I think she was part of royalty in Austria, but she married King Louis XVI to have sort of like a marriage that unified both Austria and France. So they kept chanting death to the Austrian, bread, bread, death to the Austrian, and they were coming after her. A really crazy story is that when they got there, so this is Marie Antoinette here on the left. You could see how ridiculous her dress is and how big her hair is, and it was very over the top, right? But when they actually got to the palace, the women, to go back to the March of the Women, they actually broke through the door and ransacked the whole palace in order to find Marie Antoinette and to kill her. And Marie Antoinette actually escapes through a secret passage in the palace, and she survives. And so people were coming after her to basically kill her, and she escaped. So due to the extreme revolution that was going on, the royal family got together and said, okay, we got to get out of here. So they attempted to escape into Austria because she was still, remember, her lineage Austrian. So they said, okay, we're going to go towards the border. We're going to hop it. We're going to basically go there and escape. The king disguised himself in the middle of the night as a servant. The queen dressed as a governess, and the royal children were also in disguise, and they tried to leave in the middle of their night. But actually, what's really crazy is that there was like a stop that somebody went to, that they went to with the carriage and their disguises, and the people, they actually saw who they were, and they were like, could it be? And they actually found them, and so their attempt to escape failed. The king's dash to the border displayed not only is he weak and indecisive, like we mentioned before, remember that Sweet 16 kind of immature, whatever, but now him trying to escape, the people see him as a total traitor to their country. And so you can imagine how this would fuel the people and how this rage would start to build up in the commoners saying, this is our king. No way are we going to continue to have this guy as our king. So this resulted in a more radical phase of the revolution to begin. So on this next slide, how many of you guys have seen this mechanism that is on the right here, okay? How many of you guys have seen that? So the guillotine, right? The guillotine was created by Joseph Ignaz Guillotine. That was like his name. I don't know. You got to say it with a French accent. Ho, ho, ho. But Joseph Ignaz Guillotine, what's funny about this is that it was actually developed to be a more humane method of execution. Sorry, the camera was kind of adjusting there. But it was supposed to be like less gory and more humane, but I can't imagine anything more gory or less humane than this machine right here. So the people, they put King Louis on trial, and King Louis XVI was put on trial as a traitor of France, and the king was convicted and sentenced to death through the guillotine. Now the guillotine, what's really crazy is that it was in like the public square of France, so people could actually gather for executions and like have it be like a whole event that they would go and watch. And so when the king mounted the guillotine in the public square of Paris, he was getting ready to like say like my people and like speak towards the crowd, but everybody was yelling and booing, and the drums of like the band of the soldiers was so loud that they purposely drowned him out, saying enough, like you've talked enough. We're done with you. We're executing you. You have no room to speak. And then he was then guillotined in front of everybody in the public square. And following that same year in October, Marie Antoinette, they cut her beautiful hair off as like a symbol, and also to make it simpler to guillotine her as well. They took her to the guillotine in the public square, and they completely executed her as well. Death to royalty, right? Crazy. So this began what was then known as the phase called the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror is when the revolutionaries realize the power that it has to guillotine people. So there's this guy, and he stands up, and he was a lawyer and a politician that worked very closely with the king, and he was known as Maximilien Robespierre. Okay, so Robespierre, he was a lawyer, politician in favor of the revolution, and he spoke against the king, and he created what was known as the Committee of Public Safety. The Committee of Public Safety was supposed to be a group of 12 members that took place of the king, and then they were supposed to be the ones to govern France, because now there's no one around, right? There's no one to kind of govern France, and so they said, let's have a 12-member committee that had almost absolute power, remember? And these 12 people, they became leadership over France, the Committee of Public Safety. Maximilien Robespierre, I'll just call him Robespierre, he was known as the Incorruptible. His enemies called him a tyrant, but he was supposed to be a guy of the commoners, a guy of the people, in order to speak for the people. He was the star and sort of the narrator of what was called the Reign of Terror, which lasted from September 1793 to July 1794. And so as sort of the star of the Reign of Terror, he was the main guy to say, you're executed, you're guillotined, you're gone, you come in, you're dead, whatever. And he sort of was the narrator or the conductor of the Reign of Terror. So he, I wanted to be kind of funny. He basically said, deal with it, okay? So with that said, I want you guys to write in your guided notes, what do you think is going to happen next? Discuss with the people around you, if you have someone around you and is listening with you, but what do you think is going to happen next with this Reign of Terror, with Maximilien Robespierre being a commoner? Write it in your notes, what is going to happen next in the French Revolution, okay? This ends part 4. Jump on with part 5, and we'll keep going. See ya.